So, tēnā koutou katoa, kōrero tallboys toka whenua. Welcome to the first Kai and Korero session for ANZEA, which is the Aotearoa Evaluation Association, Aotearoa New Zealand Evaluation Association. And this is our first Kai and Korero for 2025, so a very warm welcome to you all. I have the pleasure of facilitating today's panel discussion, which I'm very pleased about. So today, we're going to learn about how NGOs, an evaluation provider, a design thinking agency, and a Crown entity worked together to create a monitoring and learning framework for the NGOs. And this is basically the highs, the lows, and the lessons learned from all of them working together. And we will definitely be having time for questions and answers at the end of the session. But if you could just hold them for the end, that would be very appreciated. Thank you. So I'll just start by introducing each of the presenters. And I have checked, and we do have everyone online, so that's always a very good start. So Diego Rodriguez, he leads, or he's a leader in ACC's injury prevention team. And one of the things that Diego's really passionate about is improving program and investment management. And he's really committed to developing capabilities in monitoring and evaluation, which is great for people from the evaluation profession to hear. And he's keen on doing that both within ACC, the Accident Compensation Corporation, as well as within our partner organisations. Next, we have Amanda Hunter. So Amanda is a director at Dovetail, which is a position that is just newly acquired. So that's huge thumbs up to Amanda. And just in case you don't know, Dovetail is an evaluation provider. So Amanda co-led the project that we're about to hear, and she did this by helping to shape up the monitoring and learning framework and the tools and resources that were designed to support NGOs to implement that framework. And Avara Moody. So Avara is a senior designer at Waihi Whakaaro Think Place, and she supports a range of sectors to utilise design and research thinking methods to enhance their programs of work. So for this project, Avara provided co-design expertise, and her area of real passion is ensuring that the voices and needs of all stakeholders were at the forefront of developing the framework tools and resources. And finally, we have Chris Alderson. And Chris joins us from the Construction, Health and Safety New Zealand, where he is the CEO. And he's kindly agreed to represent the voice of the NGOs who were involved in this work. Now, I think I saw a message from Diego that he was having trouble. Okay, all right. Yes, I was having the same trouble too in terms of my audio not being able to connect for some reason. So instead of handing to Diego, perhaps Amanda, if I could hand to you to start off with, just to provide some initial sort of context for the project, and then we'll bring Diego back in once he's joined.
No problem. Kia ora koutou, ko Amanda toka whenua. And yes, I was fortunate enough to co-lead this project alongside the wonderful Avara from Think Place. And Avara and I have been asked to summarise the process that was undertaken at a really high level and speak to some of the key ingredients that sort of kept this project moving. So hopefully this makes sense without Diego's intro, but I think you'll probably get the picture. So in a nutshell, Dovetail and Think Place were asked to undertake a process, a co-design process, to design and deliver a tailored framework and tool to support NGOs to be able to monitor the performance of their own initiatives that they were undertaking as part of ACC's Workplace Injury Prevention Fund. And like all monitoring processes, we did identify some challenges quite early or from the outset. The main one here being the diversity in the NGOs and the interventions and target audiences that they were looking to work with. So on one end of the spectrum, you might have an organisation working in mental health and wellbeing with leaders in their organisation. And then on the total other side of the spectrum, we had other people undertaking good work design processes looking to swap out desks in factories that were causing injuries. So there was a real range in the audiences that they were looking to work with and the actual mahi that they were undertaking. There was also quite a range in target audiences, the individuals people were working with too. So some organisations or NGOs were working with Māori and Pacific communities specifically. Others were working with entire sectors such as construction or agriculture. So yeah, large versus small, governance versus individual support. There really was a great deal of variety in this mahi being undertaken. And so that was always going to be a challenge for a monitoring framework that was looking to find the common threads here and pull it all together. Another challenge that we came across at the beginning was the differing levels of need across the different NGOs as well. So some of the NGOs that we were working with were already quite far along on their monitoring and evaluation journey. So some were carrying out surveys, or if they had websites, some were even scraping data off their websites to understand their impact and their reach. But then we also had organisations that were pretty much starting from square one and would have no idea how to conduct a survey. So we knew going into this process that we were going to have to make it feel really inclusive and useful for everyone that was involved, particularly those that were quite far advanced on their journey. We didn't want them to feel like they were having to come along and relearn all of this stuff, but we did want to explore together what the impact that these organisations were collectively working towards with the Workplace Injury Prevention Fund. So it was important to bring it all together in one framework. I might hand over to Avara, who can talk a bit about the specific process that we went through, the step-by-step process.
Well, shall we just wait, Amanda, and see whether Diego's back on? And if Diego is on, maybe he could provide the kind of the high-level context that and then we'll get perhaps a bit more into the detail.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So Diego, have you been able to join us? Doesn't sound like it. Okay, Avara.
No worries. Seems like Diego might need to do the last resort phone call into the Zoom. Tēnā koe, everyone. My name's Avara. As Amanda said, I was co-leading and bringing a co-design perspective to this mahi. So as Amanda said, sort of understanding what some of these challenges we might be facing. Obviously, the first step of a really good co-design process is to understand who you're co-designing with and what their needs are. So we brought together the co-design principles and practices alongside the monitoring and evaluation practice as well. We split the process into 4 main phases, essentially. So the kick-off phase was to meet with the ACC Workplace Injury Prevention hui. So we went along to I think it was the annual hui, where we got to meet all the NGOs face-to-face and establish a connection with them, getting to know them and their mahi. This was really great just to put faces to names and start off that relationship with them. The next phase was to go a step further and understand what their needs were, so undertaking a needs assessment with them. And this was done through a series of online hui. So after we've met them face-to-face, we shifted online as they were dispersed across Aotearoa. We used online whiteboarding activities to create a safe space to share feedback. So individual NGOs were able to sort of communicate where they were in their monitoring journey and where they felt they needed some support. So the online whiteboard format meant that NGOs could comment more anonymously around their monitoring practices and what they wanted to work on and what they wanted to get out of this process. So through this process, we heard some really great key messages to deepen our understanding of where we needed to work or what we needed to create. We learned that it needed to be really simple and simple to follow process that would break performance monitoring down into easy to follow steps. It needed to be succinct so we could support NGOs to pick it up and start working with it straight away. It needed to recognize that needs change over time, so flexibility had to be built in. And it also needed to go beyond awareness. Many of the NGOs were already measuring how people were engaging with their product or initiative, and so they already understood sort of that aspect of it. They really wanted to measure more so the attitudes and behaviour change and truly understand whether the mahi was making a difference. So that was the second phase, all around needs of the grantees and partners. Once we felt like we understood that aspect, we started to co-design the framework with them. So took them through that process of this is what the co-design process might look like. It might feel a little bit unsure at times, but together we're going to iteratively work in a way that's flexible for grantees and partners. So it was designed in a way that it was broad enough to encompass everyone and the collective impact that they were working towards, but it was also bespoke enough and detailed enough so each grantee and partner could see themselves in it. So through these sessions, we kept on collecting data from grantees and partners and built a collective theory of change. And we went through many iterations of this theory of change, tweaking words or concepts or ideas in there to make sure we had that foundational document we could build the indicators into. And then finally, after co-designing the theory of change, we developed these series of resources and tools that NGOs could take away to support them in their monitoring journey. So this framework included the theory of change itself, alongside the table of indicators that NGOs could begin working toward monitoring, as well as instructions and resources to support the implementation of these. So we wanted to make sure that NGOs felt empowered and confident enough to collect their own data to support monitoring their initiatives against the co-design framework, and to make sure that this framework wouldn't sit on a shelf or in a file on their computer without actually being referenced. So more one-on-one sessions with them to help them understand what they needed to get started. Awesome. I'll hand back to Amanda to speak us through some of the magic ingredients we found.
Thanks, Savara. Just to finish off our wee section from Think, Place and Dovetail, we were asked to sort of reflect on what made this process effective. And we sort of agreed that one of the magic ingredients for us was really about those good relationships and trust. And that trust, I think, really flowed in a number of directions on this project. So early in the process, I remember ACC said to us that this fund was designed to provide NGOs with the freedom to kind of play and make mistakes and work flexibly towards innovative solutions. And I think that honestly, this really underscored the way of working through this entire process. So we as consultants coming in felt really empowered to flag when something wasn't working with ACC. I mean, there were times when NGOs just weren't responding to a particular approach or things started moving in different directions. And yeah, it's pretty safe to say I think we all felt that we could follow those threads of interest and kind of go down rabbit holes if we needed to explore different approaches. So yeah, we felt really safe in that space, to be honest, when things needed to change. And from our perspective as an external party coming into this space as well, I think that the trust was really evident between ACC and those NGOs themselves too. So early on, I remember ACC said to us, look, we'd like to be present in these co-design sessions with NGOs. We don't have to have our screens on, but we'd like to be there. And at the time, we kind of thought to ourselves from an evaluation perspective, like, what will their presence mean for the NGOs? Will this make them feel pressured to answer questions in certain ways or kind of present where they're at on their monitoring journey in a certain way? But when we asked NGOs if they would mind ACC being in the room through this process, they had absolutely no concerns. They actually really welcomed that presence. So yeah, I think ACC, in the end, they did attend those sessions, and this actually created this feeling that we were all on this same team. We were on this journey together, kind of learning together and creating something that would work for everyone. And I have to say, ACC really came to this process wanting to upskill themselves and learn more as a team about monitoring, and to have a client come at a project like this from this place of learning really supported this process. And then lastly, I think there was a lot of trust between Think Place and Dovetail here too. And this would be, I would say, quite key for anyone that is looking to marry up a true co-design process with evaluation on a project like this one. So yeah, I mean, I think as evaluators, we often work in very structured ways. We're used to rubrics and systematic analysis, but co-design approaches really favour flexibility and being super comfortable not knowing for a while. So Avara and I had a really high level of trust with each other working through this process to bring that balance. And for anyone who's looking to work this way in the future, we absolutely recommend it. This has really brought Dovetail and Think Place closer, I think, and laid a foundation for future work in this space. So yeah, from our perspective, relationship and trust were absolutely key to this process. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Amanda. Diego, I can see that you've made your way into a meeting room. Yay.
Hi, sir. Apologies for the technical issues. Not sure what happened. I have to move to a different room to see if I could connect.
No worries. Well, we've sort of dived a little bit into the detail without having the overall context. So perhaps if we could go back. Sorry for people online, but yeah.
Yes, and my intention was actually to go through a couple of slides just to help people visualize the journey. But let's start. I'm not sure if this is going to share the screen or not. But if I let me start from the beginning, who we are, and then I would like to take you to why we embark this process. Is that all right? Okay.
Yes.
Can you see my screen by any chance?
No, I can't.
No. Okay, that's fine. So who we are Injury Prevention Workplace in ACC. Our focus is on reducing the number and severity of injuries in workplaces in New Zealand. That's the focus of what we do. We focus on reducing the incidence and severity, but always that with an impact on the claims that go to the scheme. So there's a strong focus in ACC on looking at how we reduce the cost of those claims and how we save levies back to the levy payers. That's a strong focus. And I'm saying that you will understand why, because this impacts the way that we measure things. Now, the way that we go about reducing claims and injuries is, of course, working with workplaces to change their behaviors, change their practices, have different attitudes towards safety, and therefore reducing the risk for injuries. But we don't do that ourselves. Like ACC, we don't go to workplaces. We work with a variety of partners. Those are the NGOs. We have partners in Crown agencies like WorkSafe or MB. We partner with industry directly, like construction. As a lead body, we have Chazans, forestry with FISC, and retail, shop care, and so on. We also partner with academia, universities, and a range of other organizations, including unions, directly with businesses, etc. In this partnership, ACC, we bring capability, but we also bring funding for them to deliver the initiatives that actually change outside in the workplaces and reduce the injuries. That's how we operate. Now, I mentioned before, ACC has a strong focus on the financial benefits of these investments. And that takes me to why we embark in this process. We had two main needs. The main need was for ACC to widen the way that we look at performance. So at the moment, if you look, for example, the service agreement document of ACC and internally any performance measurement, we tend to focus exclusively on cost reduction. And then the next step is return on investment. So how much money we have put in and how much money is coming back from the initiatives. But we don't have sensitive tools to measure how the programs really change behaviors or change systems, or they perform in the more short, medium term before we get to the point of claims are not appearing in the skin, which might take sometimes years to observe. So we needed tools that were more sensitive, more delicate at measuring how we're performing together as ACC, but our partners as well. And the second need is we needed also to improve capability, share capability among ourselves, my team and my wider team, and as well with our partners, NGOs, because we knew that in order to be effective and to manage the initiatives, we need to observe how they are interacting with reality. And for that, we needed this sort of capability, not only the technical capability, but also us knowing what to do with the information and so on. And that's mainly, just in a nutshell, who we are, what we do, and why we embark in this process. So in the process, we engage, and probably everybody introduce themselves. Sorry for not introducing myself. We embark with a collaborative approach to say, well, let's work together on this problem. It's not only an ACC problem, it's a problem that the partnerships as well face, how we can together evolve and build. And that's what we bring co-design thinking, and also a technical support from Dovetail on evaluation and monitoring. And yeah, the rest is the process that I think Avara and Amanda are describing.
Okay, thank you, Diego. So my brief summary is ACC has a funding program where we work with partners, and we wanted to ensure that alongside our partners, we had good monitoring and evaluation frameworks in place, both to benefit our partners and also ACC. And so we did that by working with our partners and working with organisations who have expertise in evaluation and design thinking. And really what was key for making the frameworks and the resources and tools successful, from what we've heard from Amanda and Avara, were relationships, particularly trust, and working in that really sort of iterative, flexible way. Okay, so now Chris, this probably sounds like a good time to bring you in as one of the NGOs in this process. And what was that like for you?
Yeah, afternoon everyone, Chris Alderson. So yes, as been previously introduced, I'm the Chief Exec at Construction Health and Safety New Zealand, also called CHASNZ. So we're a very small NGO, so we're about 8 people. And look, our sort of mission or purpose is around reducing harm in the construction industry. So we're around about 7 years old. So again, young and small NGO, but we've always been very focused on being evidence-based, data-based, making sure that any sort of intervention we're pushing into the 300,000 or so workers that work in the construction industry in New Zealand is going to have some kind of positive effect, because that's why we're here. So around about 5 years ago, we started a partnership with ACC, and I guess that's really important. Diego's talked about the role and the relationship, and I guess we really see it as a partnership, because I think the first thing in that partnership that is really apparent is that you have got an alignment of objectives. So we know from the scheme and from ACC, there's obviously a clear need, to reduce injury, to reduce claims, to reduce the impost on New Zealand Inc., so to speak. And the construction industry, you'd argue, is probably one of the most frequent flyers on the workplace account. So I'm sure most of the people on the call have met or know a tradie, or probably have one in their family. And it's really prevalent in construction, particularly amongst the trades, that you're carrying some kind of musculoskeletal injury. And typically these are the ones that tend to not only be quite prevalent, but also cause people to have quite a lot of time off work. And it's not the medical cost that really costs the scheme so much, it's the time off work. So, if you're a plumber or an electrician or a builder and you hurt your knee, shoulder, back, you name it, You're probably going to put up with it for a while until you can't. And then all of a sudden you're off work for, a month, sometimes a lot longer as well. So that's a real societal problem, as we see it, because not only are we losing part of our workforce effectiveness every year, so we think about 10% of workers injure out of construction every year, which is far too high. But it's also, a serious economic cost, a big social cost. It's got a whole lot of ripple effects right across the fabric of our society. So to have that sort of objective right at the top level lined up and explainable through a framework, I think was really important, which I think we all wanted to achieve. And look, I'm talking about those other organisations that Diego talked about before. They're in a similar position as well. So they've all got their own unique profile and situation. What we're really good at as an NGO is understanding our industry and putting interventions into our industry. So one of the things about construction is not only is it sort of 10 or 11% of the New Zealand workforce, most of those businesses are tiny. So there's around about 85,000 businesses in construction. Only 1,500 of them have more than 50 people in them. Most of them are micro businesses, so literally 2 people, a dog and a van. That makes up a lot of construction businesses. So the problem that we're trying to solve is how do we reach those people? And how do we get them to change their behaviour, their approach to actually achieve our joint partnership objectives about reducing harm and reducing the impact on New Zealand society? So having some clear expectations between the team, I think, is really important in the framework as well. So what those outcomes would be. So we were both very clear about what we wanted to achieve. If we'd come out and said, hey, look, we're really only interested in, workplace fatalities and serious injuries, which, are important, but and they get a lot of the media limelight, that's actually not what the problem was. So lining up on that problem around, hey, no, it's the trades. It's more this persistent gnarly problem that we're trying to deal with was good. And then I guess the last thing we get in terms of creating a framework between us, because there does have to be some probity around relationship, because we have the Act we've got to comply with, as does ACC, but you need that probity with flexibility. And they mentioned that innovation and that ability to go out there and experiment and try things, because I'm a chartered accountant by trade, and I'll tell you, working in health and safety, it's a lot less definitive and it's a lot more fuzzy, right? Because it's a much younger business science. We don't often understand what all the drivers are, but there is some really good research around there about some of the good things to do, which is where we get our intervention logic from. So be able to put that intervention logic into a framework that's agreed from both sides to say, yep, it's fair. We've got a level playing field. You've got the probity on one side, we've got the flexibility on the other, is really important. So, we sort of treat it as a social investment contract, with ACC, which some of you will be familiar with as well. And that there is an outcome out there we're trying to achieve, but there's got to be, again, that level playing field and that transparency around how we do it. Look, it's not a one size fits all, I'd have to say that. But what we do generally see is essentially 3 elements to the framework, which we think are really important. And the first one is, are we getting the reach that we need to? So, those small businesses I mentioned, are they hearing from us? Do they know who we are? Do they know where to come and get the good stuff? Secondly, are they actually applying the guidance, the tools, all the stuff that we're showing them? And thirdly, is their behaviour and action activity sort of changing as a result of that? I.e., are we actually seeing something change? So those are the 3 things. What's probably not there so dominantly, and I don't think it should be, is, and here's the effect, because often with health and safety, it's if you pull the lever on this, you might not actually see or be able to clearly identify the effect of that claim reduction for quite a long time. But what you will be able to see in the very short term is the change in behaviour or the uptake. And if you trust the safety science out there going, hey, look, the research has been done, if you get this behaviour, you get this change, that's probably where you need to focus on, rather than trying to create a whole lot of sort of really expensive social experiments, which are really hard to monitor. So I think that was part of it too. So I'll quieten down now, but that's from my perspective, I guess, how I saw it from the NGO's perspective. Yeah, great.
Thank you so much, Chris. So Diego, just aware of time, wondering if you have some sort of closing thoughts, and then we can open it up to questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Definitely. I will. I think the point that Chris was mentioning at the end is I would like to stress on that, because the result of the process was the framework. So we have as a tangible tool that we now share with any new partners, not only the ones that participated in the process, and we also use for internal induction. But I think the key results of the process was what Chris was pointing out, which is the engagement from the NGOs and the engagement from our own team into monitoring and evaluation, which is something difficult sometimes to achieve. And I think the key ingredients there were, the relationship was already mentioned, but I think is that NGOs, probably Chris is already a converted, but other NGOs saw the value of measuring performance in this way. They start seeing the ability to see how they can change things as well. So Chris was mentioned, for example, the ability to be more strict when you measure reach. Give them the ability to understand why this is not working, or why, and perhaps they should be thinking about different target audience, or maybe my interventions are not hitting the right message. I think seeing the value by doing the process, but then start seeing tangible measurements, it created a very strong engagement from them and my team as well. So I think important to highlight that as a result of the process. And also the team now, my team has the ability to see the way forward. This is very contextual to ACC, but as I mentioned in the beginning, we have a strong focus on the financial benefits. As Chris said, financial benefit, we're trying to measure basically something that doesn't happen. It's very difficult. We're measuring when something doesn't happen, you don't know how to really measure it, isn't it? So, and if you think about, if you change your practice today, for example, you wipe the floor in your bathroom after you have a shower to avoid slipping in it. Now, falling in the bathroom might happen once every 3 years, 4 years, statistically, for a person of my age group. Well, I need to wait for 5 years to see if it really works or not, my changing behavior. So it's a very difficult thing what we're trying to measure. But my team now has the ability not only to focus on the financial outcomes, which is where ACC really needs to see, but now to see the more short-term detailed progress and help us to have a better vision, better direction, and of course, be more motivated. And I think I just wanted to say those two things as the value we get from the process. And the third thing that probably we didn't plan, it was mentioned by Avara's team, is they observed in the NGOs, in the sessions, a lot of collaboration and sharing of knowledge and information. I think that was also a very positive outcome of this process. So the NGOs were starting sharing tips about, oh, how do you measure this? How do you measure, for example, change of attitudes? Oh, we're running a survey. So Chris, for example, has a survey that runs with participant target audience, trying to understand if they use the tools, how they use them, are they effective? And things like perhaps other people didn't know what instruments they could use. So I think that's another positive result of all this process. And now, saying all this, the process hasn't finished. We're in the middle of it, and it's not an easy work just getting into the detail and measuring and going out there and refining, realizing sometimes the measures that we put in place are not the best. They're not really giving us a good picture of what is happening, so we need to shift. So it's a process, and I see this process probably taking a long while, and also influencing within ACC how we do things across the business, because the focus on financial performance still remains. So it's about how we can complement that with all this new set of measures and the new perspective what we have now on performance monitoring and evaluation.
Thank you, Diego. Okay, now opening it up for any questions. There don't seem to be any in the chat at the moment. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Jen, if that's you, I'm having trouble hearing you, so I wonder if you could, that sounds a bit better.
Is that better?
Slightly. Could you talk up? Speak up?
I'll pop it into the chat if that's easier.
Maybe we'll come back to Jen. Anyone else for the question?
Kia ora. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks, Phyllis.
Just wondering whether, as a result of NGOs having a greater understanding of the measures of their success, would encourage them to advocate for changes in policy with their funder, because we know that often it can be difficult for NGOs to risk, if you like, their funding by questioning some of the policies, the high-level policies of the funder. Perhaps risks the relationship. Just some research that I did some years ago was really clear to me that when you're monitoring your own work, you feel a sense of power about it, and it's basically your information. And you're the one that has that information, and effectively the funder doesn't have that information. So it's a kind of way of restoring the balance, that you're at the front line, you know your stuff. And as we know, for evaluation, to go out and gather that information from participants is very expensive, and you only do it every so often. So if there was a greater sense perhaps of that the NGOs totally understand the logic behind it, they retain the data gathering tools and processes and the insights that they draw from it and share those, kind of maybe there might be a sense of slight rebalancing of the power dynamic between the funder and the NGO. Got any comments on that, Diego, perhaps, or the Amanda?
Great question, Phyllis. And I think it's a hope more than an observation. So I think we hope that that's going to be the case, that by enabling this capability with NGOs, they will have the ability perhaps to inform ACC on how we direct our policies, or in this case, how we think about injury prevention. I think we're too early at the moment for them to have enough, but I completely agree with what you're saying. They're too early for them to feel that full empowerment and have the ability to then challenge that, because we're starting to do the measurement process and they're starting to realize the value of it and they're starting to know how to use it. But the intention or the hope is that in the future, that will become a powerful tool to inform us about what works better or what doesn't work, and then adjust ourselves. As I said before, is the ability to observe the performance of what we're doing, which before we were not that good because we're waiting for too long. Now doing it in the short term, it will give us two things. It will give us a better insights on what are the elements that are happening or not happening through the journey of the intervention. And as well, it will ability to modify those things more real time, rather than waiting the long run, which in our case could be 2 to 5 years to see any impact on the scheme.
Cool. Thank you.
Don't know if Chris, do you have any opinion on this?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because I think it goes back to that nature of partnership and joint objectives again. I think, we do get into some situations where we do challenge, but it's responsible challenge. And the one area I'm thinking of, Diego, and thanks for the person who asked the question, is around mental health, for example, because there's as probably many of you know, construction has some real problems around mental health and suicide, yet that's not currently covered in the scheme except under quite exceptional circumstances. Now, we can have those discussions with ACC because they know that we're coming from a very joined up position, because what we are saying is, hey, look, that's an impairment, and we think impairment is a contributory factor to musculoskeletal injuries as well. So I think even though it's quite a challenging concept, I think we still have a meeting of minds about our overall objectives, which I think is different than if you just went out there and procured a service from someone, where you probably have an even more contractual sort of situation happening where people wouldn't probably have those conversations so much. So my feel is that it actually strengthens the discourse between the funder and the NGO around, as long as it's responsible challenge, and as long as the relationship's there, which I think it is, and as long as we think we've still got our joint interests at heart. So that's kind of how I see it.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jen has put her question in the chat. So how did you develop the theory of change? Was it largely based on research, or did NGO experience also come into it? Maybe Amanda and Avara, that could be a question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So there were sort of three main outputs that came into the framework that we were able to hand over to NGOs and to ACC at the end of this. The first one was the theory of change. The second was a table of indicators that NGOs could start working to collect data against themselves, and they could pick from and build on over time. And then the third part was resources that they could take away to help them feel empowered to be collecting that data. For example, this is how you carry out an interview. This is what best practice looks like in a survey. And all three elements of that were really heavily based on co-design, particularly that theory of change. So we went through a process of workshops with, as Avara spoke to a bit earlier, the online whiteboarding activities, where we worked with organisations to understand what they were doing, what the activities they were doing were, what they were looking to achieve, thinking about those short, medium, long-term outcomes and impacts. And then we tried to kind of consolidate those and figure out where the common threads were, the common elements were across those NGOs or those organisations. And then where the research came into it is when we started working on those indicator tables. So we did co-design indicators with organisations to understand what they were currently collecting and how we could build on that, so we weren't reinventing the wheel. But we also wanted to look at proxy measures and best practice research internationally and here in New Zealand to understand what indicators they could start, or what data they could start to collect that would really hold water or carry weight when they were trying to demonstrate to other funders or to their current funder, ACC, whether the work that they were doing was having a true impact. So it was a little bit of both, but I think the unique thing about this process was the true co-design thread that was all the way through this. It was really front and centre. I don't know if you had anything to add to that on the co-design front, Avara.
No, I think you covered it off, Amanda. I think just the continual iterative sort of nature of that theory of change. So I guess it is involving a lot of the experience of the NGOs in that iterative process. So testing something with them and then just checking if that resonated and doing that over and over again, essentially, was how that theory of change was produced alongside the activities Amanda just stepped through.
And it was a significant time was spent on that process, Avara. Like, it was, we did have to come back, we'd send emails, we'd ask for feedback, we'd jump on another call, we'd work with NGOs individually, we'd come back as groups. It was a collaborative, iterative process, and we wanted to make sure we got it right so that NGOs would see themselves in that theory of change when it was finished and feel confident that they could take it away and that it actually represented them as an organisation, as well as everyone else in the Workplace Injury Prevention Fund as well.
Okay, and probably I was just going to say, what will be our final question? That was Jen saying thank you so much. So our final question, and it's possibly a two-parter, maybe one to you, Amanda, and one to you, Diego. So the Amanda bit is, how did you measure attitudinal shift?
How did we measure attitudinal shift? Oh, I'd have to have the framework in front of me. So attitudinal shift was absolutely one of the aspects that came into the framework. But when we started this work, I think what we found was that a lot of NGOs were actually already measuring attitudinal shift, you know, things like surveys and asking at the end, like, did this change your attitude about health and safety in the construction industry, or whatever it might have been for that particular intervention. What these NGOs were quite excited about and keen to start working towards was behaviour change. So attitudinal shift was absolutely some of that earlier stuff that they were looking to do. And there were measures that could possibly be shared with you. I couldn't speak to that, but really what we focused on these NGOs being able to move towards was behaviour change, because I think the research does show that that's how you start to affect those numbers that you're targeting in the health and safety space.
Thank you. And yes, Diego, the other part of the question was, are you able to share any tools from the project?
I believe we can. We can share. I mean, our ACC information is open, so we could share I believe the entire framework with people just to have a look. I think we'll probably have to make sure that we have edited any sort of information that might be sensitive. But yeah, we can share the framework, Sarah. We can have a conversation after this meeting to see how we can package it and distribute it to the group.
Sure. Thank you so much. All right.
Can I just say as well that a lot of the information that NGOs, which are charities, a lot of them have to deliver to the Charities Commission through their statement of service provision. We can reuse the stuff for that as well. So it's actually another bonus for us, and that's publicly available too under the Charities Commission. We have to file our statement of service delivery, which is a new audit requirement in the last 2 years. But yeah, 2 birds with 1 stone.
All right. Well, given the time, I really wanted to say a huge thank you to Diego, Amanda, Ivara, and Chris for all coming together and for having this panel conversation. And I wanted to thank everyone who has joined us today and do a wee promo for the next ANZEA Kai Korero session, which is going to be on the 12th of March, and that's going to be about social investment and the role of evaluation. So I'm expecting a huge amount of interest there. And I see that we have one more question. So to know during method theory change, were any Pacific models used for engagement?
Great question from ECG. I don't think there was a specific Pacific model used through the engagement process, but what we did do alongside the sort of workshops with the broader group is make time for one-on-one kōrero with the NGO leads or whoever they wanted in the room with them, to be more of a talanoa style conversation with them, just to enable that kind of more flexible conversation rather than a structured workshop, and making sure that the cultural elements that were important to Māori and Pacific NGOs and their audiences were present in that theory of change and the tools and resources as well. So that was something that Amanda and I worked quite a lot on, is making sure that those cultural elements were present, because we needed it to be sort of broad enough to fit everyone while still sort of acknowledging that those differences in the ways that you work with Māori and Pacific and other ethnic communities as well. So yeah, I think having a bit of a combo method of general sort of workshop style, but also that more flexible one-on-one sort of engagement is how we approach that. Great question.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And yes, I think now it's time to leave. All right. So yes, again, huge thank you, and thank you for all the positive feedback that we've received. It's really wonderful.